I thank the speakers again for that enriching session. Moving forward, we are now going to start with our second session, which will discuss about the transition impact on MSMEs. Let me introduce you to the chief guest and the panelists for this session. Okay, so introducing our chief guest for the session, Shri Atish Kumar Singh, Joint Secretary, AFI, Ministry of MSME. In the panel, we have Ms. Ashwini Hingne, Associate Program Director, WRI India. Mr. K. Mohan, Co-founder, SEP India Private Limited. Mr. Nikhil Bhatia, Co-founder, Hop Electric. And Mr. Suresh Kumar Kandrigula, Head of Engineering, Baxi Mobility. The session is moderated by Mr. Narayan Kumar Srikumar, Associate Director, Electric Mobility, Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. So let's begin the session with a context-setting presentation by Dr. Shrestha Banerjee.
So the previous session was focusing on large enterprises. In this session, we'll focus the conversation more on small enterprises, particularly small, micro, but also medium. Medium has overlap between, I believe, the other session also, but it is largely focusing on MSMEs. And the reason we wanted to have a very focused discussion on MSMEs is because they almost form the backbone of the manufacturing sector. If we look into the composition of MSMEs, I share in ACMs. This is from our cluster studies that we did in 3 clusters, which are Pune cluster in Maharashtra, Hosur in Tamil Nadu, and Gurugram in Haryana. It is coming up that in some of the clusters, the share of MSMEs in the total ACMs is about 95 to 96%. So overall, it is very, very significant. And, in fact, I was reading one of the reports of that has come out from ACMA, which is actually focusing on sessions how to transition MSMEs in the process. So there is a very important recognition that this constitutes a key section in the mobility transition that we are experiencing. Now, when we break down into the transition challenges that are being faced by MSMEs or what they will face as we move on with the EV transition, broadly we can break it down into 4 aspects, which distinguishes them and maybe which should probe us all to develop policies, plan investments around it. Number 1 is financial challenge. It is that MSMEs, we all know that they have limited financial resources compared to the large enterprises. And when we look at the kind of investments, innovation, R&D that is required for this transition in India to leapfrog, they really have limited access. And it is not just they don't have their own resources, that they have limited access to the kind of risk investments or institutional capital. I think one of the key things that we really need to think of is institutional capital in this case, that MSMEs have limited access to. The second thing is they have a challenge of capacity. And capacity is the limited capacity in terms of technology adoption, which somehow also relates to their financial access. And second, and also limited capacity for investing in R&D. The third challenge MSMEs have is in terms of workforce. When we talk of that, there is a large section of people who are dependent on these enterprises. And I have put out one number, and this comes again from our ground service, is there are, and also backed by government data, there are about 97,000 people who are engaged in the medium, small and micro enterprises in Pune cluster. Now the number varies, but there is, and these are all direct dependents. And then there is a host of indirect dependents in the supply chain. The second important point is that in this host of people that are dependent, a large share is contract and informal workers. So contractual and informal workers who do not have the guarantee of an enterprise that something will be done for them is also a key challenge for MSME transition. And the fourth challenge is the policy challenge. We have been talking of since morning, like what kind of policies are in place right now to propel the EV transition. And when we look at policies such as the PLI schemes that are there, it is focusing on high value manufacturing. Now, this kind of manufacturing also requires to qualify for some of the incentives that are being provided under the schemes are only can be leveraged by people who have more resources. So there is a challenge of access to the incentives that are under the various policy incentives right now that are in place. And if we look collectively at these four challenges that we need to think ahead in the transition question for MSMEs in the automobile sector, I will, and this is my last slide, I think, which can lead to the panel discussion with our able moderator, is that how do we improve financial access for the MSMEs, such as low-cost institution loan, risks, credits, etc. And there can be many, many instruments of improving financial access. The second question, which we have posed in our own report, is can we have a dedicated transition fund for MSMEs? And the scope is there under the MSME Act of the Government of India that was developed in 2006. There are clear sections. The objective of the law is very well defined, as well as Section 9 of the Act specifically focuses on how can we improve on clusters of MSMEs, how can we provide them technology, how can we improve their financial access. So can we leverage the law to build a transition fund that is dedicated for MSMEs? The third question that we pose is how can workforce transition be ensured? Given that it is not a very, we don't have a lot of permanent employees, but we have to need to think of contractual and informal workers. So how can companies and enterprises plan? What kind of policies we need for that? And the fourth question is that what changes are required in the current EV related policies that can be strengthened further to push them or to do green manufacturing, to reorient their businesses, and also to look for other customers in the entire value chain or in the ecosystem. So with that four questions that we, some of the answers we have indicated in our reports, I leave the panel to take it up in their discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, iForest team. First of all, good afternoon to everyone. We have a very distinguished panel to discuss about this transition, like ICE to EV, the challenges and opportunities that we are going to face it. First of all, I would like to congratulate iForest team to putting the effort in capturing the challenges that has been faced by the MSME sector in India. As she has highlighted, MSME being the heart of our manufacturing sector, because there are close to around 64 million MSMEs in India, which have been serving the jobs to almost 120 million. I'm just telling about the numbers. Atish sir can correct me. Just broad numbers in which how the MSMEs are so much important for us, because they have been contributing more than 30% of our total GDP as well as 45% of the exports. So they play a very critical role. So how we can bring them together when we have been pushing towards the transition? Because in the first session, we have heard from Singhaji what are the type of policies and frameworks that government have been creating to enable this transition. So let me start with Mohanji on that transition, because being a representative from an automobile component manufacturer, SEP India. So what do you think about with this adapting transition that has been happening from ICE to EV? What is the changing demand in the EV components that has been happening? What are the type of precision engineering? Because being an most important brand in precision engineering, what do you think that what are the new skill set that has been brought down over there? Second most important aspect that iForest team has already highlighted about the finance. What are the excess of finance that need to be required to enable this transition to happen? Because we have many success stories in our textile sector, like technology upgradation fund, and what is the role that the government has played in that. So I would like to know from you how we can what are the type of new financial products or the schemes that has to be required to enable this transition, as well as what are your challenges that you have been seeing from this changing that has been happening in terms of automobile component manufacturing. Over to you, Mohanji.
Thank you. Thank you. I represent a small company. We have started as a micro cap, and we continue to remain a small, medium scale engineering enterprise, manufacturing precision engineering components. So the question is, how do we adapt to the changing changes that are inevitably going to take place in terms of the demand for the components. And as the iForest study has already shown us, that almost 70 to 80% of the components will become obsolete that we currently manufacture will become obsolete, will not be required for the EV. It is a big challenge. I really do not have a ready-made answer. And also, I do not have an answer to what do we do with the labor force that we have. I looked at our own labor force of about 200 people. About 150 or 60 of these people are engaged, or 80% are engaged in manufacturing components for the engine and for the starter, which will not be required. That means almost 80% of what we currently manufacture, not 80, 60% of what we currently manufacture would not be required. So two things. One is, how do we fill up that capacity in terms of turnover? And what do we do with the machines which are there to make these components? These are CNC machines. We have got invested about 25 crores in CNC machines which are producing, churning out millions of these components. Which they go into the fuel injection systems, they go into the engines, they go to starter motors, and I'm not able to find an easy answer. Of course, as a company, we are a machine shop, so we have some leeway because machining is very generic. You can make machined components for various other industries, not just the automotive industry. So either not by choice, but by sheer, I think, fact that we were there in the industry, we have got into non-automotive components quite some time back, maybe even 10 years back. We started diversifying more like serendipity. It's not that I went and looked out for this component, but I was really exploring opportunities outside, and we got into non-automotive components. And today, 50% of our components are really non-automotive, non-core automotive. When I say non-automotive, we do supply large number of components to the petrol dispensing station, a large customer in US who buys petrol dispensing station equipment, and we do make those. So they're not directly automotive related, but they are machinery related. And then we also cater to non-automotive, into sports goods and things like that. So we have diversified away, and to some extent we are therefore protected from the imminent collapse that's going to happen in the automotive engine and the powertrain driving systems. But when I look around my colleagues in the industry, the other companies in the industry, I'm really worried about the two aspects of the employment that can be generated, that what will happen to the employment that is currently being utilized in these, and how do I keep my machines engaged, capital utilization. So it's a question mark. We have diversified. We are fortunate to being in Hosur and Bangalore, which is an aerospace hub. I know that aerospace is coming in a big way in terms of component manufacturing. The government's incentive for what is called set-off, there was going to be large comp. So we are already trying to get into the certification for the aerospace certificate, which is called AS 9000, which is a little more complicated than the ISO and the current IS specification for the automotive components. So some of the things that I can think of in terms of product diversification into non-automotive core engine components, because number of components required for the EV in terms of what we currently can do are very few. We have a few components like the drive shaft, but even the drive shaft, the technology is a little different because the NVH requirements for electric vehicle is quite different from, because there has to be really, there's hardly anything which makes a noise there. So even these components we are really required, machine components are required, have to have the NVH component. So we need to get into a higher categorization. We are going with geared shafts. The geared shaft requirement is of a higher classification than the conventional geared shaft that we make. So there is technology change involved, there's machinery change involved. There's a huge investment required for changing over to a new component, even like the gears. We don't make gears, and not many in the component industry make gear, because gear investment in gear manufacturing technology is minimum of 5 crores, maybe even more than 10 crores. So not many of these small scale MSMEs are able to put in that kind of investment. But we are saying we have no choice but to take that plunge and get into these higher investment modules for meeting the electric, because that is going to be the need for the future. So one is investment required in new technologies. Second is looking for new product lines outside of the automotive industry, if it's possible to do with, as I said, with a generic production process like machining, we can do that. And the third factor is in terms of skilling our people, which I think is going to be a big challenge, because we still have, like they said, 60% of the labor is contractual labor, and these contract labor come from, where do they come from? They come from Bihar, they come from Assam, they come from Orissa. They are unlettered. They are very hardly any. As you can see, the level of education in our country, even primary and secondary education, is so poor that they can hardly read or write, and so their mathematical skills, arithmetical skills are very poor. So what they can do is, with their hands and eyes, they can do physical kind of work like loading machines and but when you're talking of little more complex things like what the AI, what the EV will require, I'm not sure whether the skill levels are there. We have to impart these skill levels, and I was just talking to Mr. Sri Kumar for the, as I said, if you're doing a large scale education of people, I would like to send our people there to learn what skills are required for these people. So you have to keep looking out for upskilling your people and doing what is required to make them more employable in the new EV industry and the EV landscape. So this is my answer to, in terms of the product profile and the investment that is required to make us more ready for the EV phase or EV ecology.
Thank you, Mohanji. Thank you. This is a great message for all the micro cap companies, because like in India, in MSME, 90% are micro, still micro. So they have to highlight the importance of product diversification, the investments that need to be get made for it, as well as the skilling. Thanks for highlighting the importance of this product diversification over here. Now let me come to Mr. Suresh, who is representing Baxi Mobility. They are basically an industrial group who have been working on both sides. I would like to say they try to make the ICE vehicle as well as the EV vehicles. So he can provide us an, I would say, in bird's eye view, because he has seen both the things, both the sides of the story, because he knows about the what kind of challenges he has faced in setting up the ICE vehicles as well as the EV vehicle. So I would like to hear from you, what are the major challenges that you have been seeing in this transition, and what could be the opportunities for that?
Yeah. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, IFRS team, to conduct this type of seminars or conferences to gather the information from the OEM side and to transfer to the government. I came from Baxi, so we are the manufacturer of the ICE vehicles mainly, like engine and the transmission and the IC three-wheeler mainly. Since almost 15 years, we are selling the vehicles. But at the same time, as per the technology trends changing from the government side, and each person, we have a responsibility to reduce our carbon footprints in the area. So that we have changed, like we last 2022, we started to change from ICE to EV. But there is a lot impact from the plant side. We have a plant in Roorkee. So it's a 15 years old plant. We have a lot of people, experience almost 30 plus, uneducated the plant people, because they are working in the machine shop on the lines, assembly lines. So first of all, we have some issues, like challenges came from the in-house first. So we are dedicated our in-house persons first, how to transfer, hello? Yeah. So how to first of all change their mindset from ICE to EV. Everyone is that time as afraid that EV vehicles means there is issue in the safety, the fire, these all points. But yes, we have educated, almost we took 1 quarter time without changing any vehicle from ICE to EV. We have educated our in-house people first, our employees, to transfer from ICE to EV. What are the, like, mainly taking care of? Yeah. So mainly what are the critical parameters we have educated our in-house. After 1 quarter, then we have changed our entire vehicles towards the EV vehicles. At the same time, as per the government norms and as per the carbon footprints, we have reduced our diesel variants mainly, because that is the first step we need to take without any taking the outsiders. For taking that step, we have reduced some diesel variants and we have added EV variants. So there are a lot of challenges we faced. Mainly, I call as a macro level 3 challenges. How to select motor controllers, the first point. Second will be the how to select batteries, which type of batteries, lead acid, lithium. Third one will be the how to integrate these systems in my ICE vehicles, so that we are removing the ICE engine. So how to integrate? So these things, and also after the testing, we need to get into the market with first time right product. So almost it took 1 year time without wasting our time. We have checked everything 100% right. Then only we sold the vehicle. So now currently we are selling almost 1,000 vehicles per month in the only that NCR region. So my conclusion, my bottom line is that we have educated first in-house. Then we have changed our vehicles from ICE to EV, and then we have sold to the market. So these major three changes is required from any OEM side. This we have done from our side.
Thank you, Sureshji. Thanks for highlighting the importance of transition, how you have done it. But being in Baxi Mobility, being an, I would say, the history of 4 decades, they can easily make it up to the mark. But now I would like to turn it to Mr. Bhatia, who belongs to, I would say, like the startup community of India that has been fueling our EV transition. So, what are the major challenges that you have faced? Because when you have been building a new vehicle, that's something that you have been building your dream. When you have been building that dream, are you find scarcity in finding the right component for that dream, or what are the challenges you have faced on that, and how you have resolved that thing? Over to you.
So we started our journey about 4.5 years back, right? And overall, like we have seen those stages of how to build a vehicle, right? How to test it, how to find suppliers. I would say we ourselves are MSME still, right? But MSME industry has been very helpful to us because big legacy manufacturers of components and all of that, they still do not entertain newcomers so easily unless you give them a substantial scale. But on the other side, new entrants in the market, new MSMEs, or people who were earlier into aftermarket manufacturing, they found an opportunity to pivot to do manufacturing for younger OEMs where the quantities are little lesser. So MSME sector has overall has been very helpful to us in that sense in our 4 year long development journey. On the see, we do not have a lot of legacy lineage on the ICE side of the ecosystem, right? But very fundamentally and foundationally, if we talk about other than the engine, right? Engines are removed, right? So engine its own self has got like a traditional two-wheeler engine will have somewhere close to 200, 250 odd components, small gaskets, bolts, smaller things, right? On contrary, if we are doing a motor, motors are much more simpler, much more automated process. So manual intervention is a little lesser. Uh, Windings, cores, shafts, and then casings. So yeah, amount of components on one-on-one basis between motor and engine, they are definitely reduced. Some things have increased. Like there was earlier, there used to be a 12-volt small lead acid battery to power the entire architecture, electrical architecture of the system. Now the batteries have become one of the major components of the entire ecosystem. Other than that, lights are still the same, chassis are still the similar. Like again, re-engineering is required, but core fundamental function of the components are still the same. So one part of industry still stays intact. People in MSME sector who were deeper into manufacturing components for the engine part of it, right? They are getting impacted. When I finished my engineering, I started my career with an internship in Manesar with a precision manufacturing factory. When sir mentioned, so I could recall all of that. IMT Manesar, right? So precision, they were manufacturing for TAFE. So they were doing small, multiple CNC machines, manual people, manufacturing small injection nozzles for the diesel engines. Right. So now I can, when you mentioned that, I was correlating with that, and I realized that okay, now I remember there were about 110 people in that facility, right? About if each people, like one person per machine, right? Basic job was input, take something in, put it into the cassette, and then once the part is finished, move it out. So what will happen to that community? Again, interesting question, but we don't have an answer because that component is no more essential when we move from ICE to EVs. Uh, can these people be upskilled, reskilled? Yes, definitely yes. From our point of view as an OEM, OEMs usually are into business of assembling the products, not in manufacturing the products. They engineer and then they go out to factories. They ask them, then can you manufacture this for us? Can you manufacture this for us? And then they bring all of that together and then put up an assembly line to bundle the product together and churn out with a retail story, consumer side service network, and all of that. Whether OEMs will get impacted disastrously, maybe not, unless somebody is very vertically integrated in manufacturing components in-house. But the supplier ecosystem for these OEMs, there will be change to it. There will be substantial change to it. People who have picked up the baton very quickly on pivoting towards, let's say, motor winding manufacturing, right? Copper coils or ingots, small ingots. So those people are able to stay forward. But in my limited experience, what I have seen is people who did not had very deep investments in traditional ICE market are able to pivot faster. But people who have deeper investments in that sector, they are still waiting to cover up the cost of what they have already invested, and then eventually they'll find out a way to move forward. So that's how we are looking at all of it. I remember Saket and team from iForest, we had a virtual call about how we are upskilling the people, how we are changing this. So in my assembly line, we picked up freshers from ITIs, right? We skilled them up because we knew how much they, like, even if I hire legacy people into my ecosystem, will I be able to make use of them? So instead of that, like, most of my factory staff right now would be aged less than 30. Right? So these are younger people from ITIs where we are training them and teaching them, okay, what is the assembly supposed to be? Because from purely mechanical, now the work nature has become an electromechanical. Right? There is more wiring assemblies, there is more, entire harness architecture has to be laid out. Right? Testing has changed disastrously. Now we are not testing for NVH, so to say. Right? We are testing for whether the coupler will be permanent or will get loose on a jerk. So that's how things have changed internally as OEM. But again, he is a better person to say how 40-year transition is held up for him. For us, it was not that difficult. We started off from one block and then we moved to another block. So yeah, that's my limited experience on this space.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you for sharing your story of how you have put efforts on upskilling. Discuss about the workforce issues, because as you have been working very closely in one of the MSME sector like Coimbatore, I would say like that in India's automobile component manufacturing, the Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra and Haryana plays I would say more than 60% is actually covered by them. So as I would like to hear from you as being a part of CSO think tank, I would like to know from your ground level experience, what are the major issues or challenges that you have been faced by, especially focusing on our workforce, how they can get ready for this transition? Over to you, Ashwini.
Thanks, Srikumar. Thanks, Srikumar. And I think a lot of it has already been covered. I mean, that is the ground level, really, that we engage with very closely. I'll just take a step back to essentially say what are the key sort of shifts that are going to impact MSMEs and workers. So one is what's been already said, that the number of components is going to move from 2,000 to 20, a number that everybody in this room, I guess, has heard. But the second thing, which I think Nikhil alluded to, is also a more shrinking of the highly tiered structure that the traditional ICE supply chain has had. So where we have OEMs and then tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so on and so forth, it's going to become a lot more compact because the number of parts are lower and also there's more specialization, and therefore third thing is the change in roles, which pertains specifically to the workforce. So I think, again, our previous speakers mentioned very briefly that the kind of job roles, skilled job roles that are now shifting from mechanical to electrical or electronic. The second corollary of that is also the more hand-based work or the more low-skilled work to very highly skilled work that is required. And the final thing is the fact that globally, the world is changing, and the world has actually changed at a much faster pace. So about 60% of our auto component exports go to Europe and North America, both of which now have mandates on zero-emission vehicles as early as 2030. So again, that affects a lot of exporters or auto component manufacturers in India. And finally, just India's own trajectory. So we have a net zero by 2070 target, but what does that really mean? One is, of course, our auto sector is growing. We are not a saturated market, so overall it's growing. But if we are to meet that target of net zero by 2070, our studies show that by 2030 we need to have 30% share as EVs, and by 2050 that share of EVs has to become 90%. Now that is where the shift is happening, which will trickle down to the ground level. And specifically, why we started working in Coimbatore, and this is 3 years ago. The idea is to understand, like iForest study has done, what parts of the value chain are going to get impacted, where are these parts being manufactured. So we, of course, have the key hubs that we are looking at, but also what we wanted to really understand is where that transition is taking place as we speak. And Tamil Nadu, as everybody knows, is one of the fastest adopters of EV manufacturing. And therefore, Coimbatore was very, very great starting point where we could see not just existing auto component manufacturers who would need to transition, but also a new emerging industry. And based on our work there for the past 3 years, the few things that have really sort of emerged as key factors of risk, I mean, apart from all the capacity and other constraints that Shrestha already mentioned, is the first is the awareness of the pace of change of the industry and what is expected of them. That has not really sort of reached the ground level. A few innovative and sort of more progressive entrepreneurs are probably there yet, but not the larger sector. The second is that even today, the sector faces a paucity of skilled workforce. Talk to any entrepreneur, they'll say we don't find skilled labor, right? And increasingly, as we are moving to a more high-skilled demand, that will become an issue. The third is, of course, the level of diversification, which again, our previous speaker spoke about. And the fourth is, in terms of capacities, one very important difference in this industry is that the ICE industry has a very clear set of quality standards, and there is clarity for MSMEs on what the OEMs expect from them. But the fact that the EV industry is still evolving, there is no standard. Everything is changing as we speak. And therefore, for MSMEs at this point to keep up with that change again becomes a standard. So these are the four factors that essentially drive risk in MSMEs and workers. And I'll finally just mention very briefly also the opportunities, because today's topic is opportunities and risks. So I think we always end up, like, especially in the think tank space, love to talk about the challenges that the MSME sector face, which are very real. But there's also a very important fact that we need to remember, that the MSME sector in India is very agile. You see a business opportunity, you see the economics, and they're up for it. So I think the EV transition also sort of poses an opportunity for the MSME sector. And as we've seen in Coimbatore, which has traditionally been a motor hub, motors and pumps hub, we have a cluster that the government of Tamil Nadu is sort of bringing together, which will become a electric motor manufacturing hub. So I think that's where it's not just about MSMEs who are currently doing business in the auto component sector, but also allied sectors that can come into this space. The second is inclusion of women. Again, in Tamil Nadu, we've seen there's an entire facility which is run by women. I have personally met women entrepreneurs who are leading firms that are manufacturing components. So that's the other opportunity. And finally, in terms of R&D, now R&D we typically associate with large companies, but I think when in an industry which has become now a great leveler, so the Mahindras and the startups and the MSMEs are all in a learning phase. I think there is a huge demand for innovation, which the MSMEs have always brought in. So in the previous session, we spoke about bringing costs down by half. I think that is where our MSMEs would play a huge role in bringing in innovation. So I'll just stop here and happy to.
Thank you, Ashni. Thanks for highlighting how agile our MSMEs were and the importance of Nari Shakti over there. Thanks for that. And I just want to pick up a very key point from your views, the importance of the targets that you have mentioned about the ZEP targets or zero emission vehicle or 30% by 2030. How these targets will turn out to be the assurance for our investors. So I would like to come back to Mohan ji. Do you think that setting up a targets which will help to put investments in the R&D facilities for EV components, or it will help to bring in more and more investors' confidence over these transitions? What are your quick thoughts on that, because we would like to go back to Atish sir to hear his policy roadmap for that, our EV transition. So before that, I would like to have a quick question with you.
I have not understood. The target is for investment,
It's-
the government helping in investment target? What is
Yeah,
it?
I just want to reiterate that, because Ashwini has mentioned about the importance of setting the targets. Like we have seen in our power sector, that because when the government made the announcement that I want to achieve 175 gigawatt by 2022, the market start responded back. Similarly, because 30% in 2030 we keep on hearing, but we don't see an official announcement or the work towards that target. Ashwini will agree with me also. So in that aspect, if the government, the policy makers give a signal that we need to achieve 30% by 2030, firm targets, because anyway we are in the doorstep of revising our NDCs. So is it possible we can bring transport as a core component of that? Because when there is a target or oriented market or a regulated market, the investors have more confidence. So to address her remarks about the R&D and the investments towards R&D, can we do those kind of things?
It's very difficult. You cannot ask an MSME in the automotive sector where, as you know, the automotive sector margins are very thin. You cannot ask an MSME and put a target and say 30% target. Will MSME respond? Does he have the ability to respond? He may want to, but does he have the ability, the finances to respond to that? I don't think the MSME can respond. But taking a point from there, it is a possibility that the OEMs, large OEMs, when they're converting to EV, they have a target that you should purchase at least 30% or 40% of your components, like offset program government is having for aerospace. You will purchase at least 30-40% from the existing IC engine suppliers. So instead of creating new suppliers for your new components, skill sets are different, totally different. But you encourage your existing suppliers in IC to keep that employment potential and keep those employees occupied, to have the large companies like Tata Motors or Hyundai or whoever it is, and say, look, you're changing over to the IC, to EV. But when you do change over, you must have a large component of the existing ICE manufacturers in your supply chain. If that kind of a target can be imposed on the OEMs, I don't know if it's possible or not, if it's democratic or not, but then that might help. And then also fund the MSMEs. The large companies should fund the MSMEs for the R&D effort required to change over, transition to the EV component. But intrinsically, the number of components is so small that it is very difficult to keep the workforce engaged with 20% of the number of components that you want to manufacture. How will you keep them engaged? So that is one. I have another suggestion, which is totally out of this context, is the government is really pushing EV very hard. And this is a question for Mr. Atish Kumar. The government is really pushing EV very hard. And for EV, your GST is 5%. But there's another angle to it. There's another way we can do it. If the intention is to reduce the pollution effect, like, both Toyota and Honda have not taken the EV route in a big way. They're taking the hybrid route. And one of the things I was talking and I was told that one of the reasons why hybrid is not getting adopted in India in such a big way is because of the cost. Because the difference between GST structure on the hybrid and IC is only 5%, whereas the 30% or 35% difference in the EV. So why don't you make hybrids more attractive? Two things it will ensure. One is that you will definitely, the mileage consumption, some say 15 kilometers a liter will go to 25 kilometers. So you will reduce 50% of the fuel consumption to reduce the pollution, number one. Number two, you will keep a large part of the workforce engaged because the hybrid engine use the IC engine. So we will look at, instead of pushing only electric, and in the case, the customer is not that willing. You can see in Western countries already, the electric vehicle is losing some of its charm. Tesla is having, so they can see lines of cars lined up if there is a snowstorm because electricity fails. The same thing will happen in India. When a high temperature that you're running, the consumption for air conditioning of the car will be quite severe on the battery. So I would suggest that a via media for India could be to make hybrids more economically attractive for the consumer, so that we make the switch. Eventually, we'll make a switch to electric. But can you make the switch a little slower through a system of hybrids and encouraging hybrids to come in? And so you achieve part of the objective of the goal of reducing pollution. At the same time, you retain a large part of the workforce engaged in making these hybrid engines This is a suggestion which I'm sure that the Niti Aayog or Mr. Amitabh Kant has thought about it, and I don't know whether it is being given up because it's unviable or not. But it is a thought for me, many of us in the automotive, I've talked to very senior people in the automotive industry, saying that hybrid is an option which government is not pushing very hard, but it looks like could be possible to do so and achieve the objectives that government wants, and also retain this large employment of 2 or 3 or 5 million people. I don't know how many people are employed in the automotive component industry. So I think this is my suggestion. The third one is with regard to the finance, that even though there is a feeling, I set up my company 30, 40 years back, and I know what troubles I went through at that time with the 1 crore capital or something. I had to literally beg and borrow. I couldn't get that 1 crore that easily. And then the government is willing to give subsidy. 75% cost, they will subsidize. Balance 25% I bring in. How do I bring in? As a fresh engineer, I was not an engineer, fresh engineer, had some work experience. But how do I bring in that 25 lakhs of rupees that is required for me? I had to pledge my house, my partner had to pledge his house, and even today the house is pledged. So even to bring in that 25%, we have to struggle to bring that money in as a small scale MSME. Number one. Number two, the cost of setting up. Today, if we are setting up an MSME, setting any manufacturing unit, if the total project cost is X, say 5 crores, out of which 60% is required for land and building, and land and building is the most expensive part, and they start yielding results only after 10 years or 15 years. What will immediately yield results is the machinery that you put in. And on that basis, machinery, banks are willing to give certain subsidy or certain loan, but then the guarantee for the balance part is required by the promoter. So the cost of land and building is so prohibitive that the government should really create these structures of plug and play, that we'll give you the space, we'll give you the rental. So you don't have to invest in land and machinery. You have power availability is a big problem. Typically, the power sanction or even the application for power accepted by the government, say Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, only after the building is fully ready. While the building construction is going on, you can't even apply for the power. After the building is ready, they will come and inspect and say, okay, you're worthy for it. Then it takes 6 months to get the power. And then there are other hassles to getting the power. So if you can give a plug and play arrangement where your building is available, you lease out the space, so the banks will be able to then lease out. Then, and so entrepreneur doesn't have to put in 60, 70% of the capital cost into building, which yields results much later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohanji. The limitation of time, I would like to move to Atish sir. Sir, you all heard from our different esteemed panelists about the different ground level challenges of this transition to happen. But I would like to congratulate the policy makers actually, the putting the efforts in terms of the PLI scheme, FAME, as well as the major role of government is to signal the market, because as our honorable PM used to say that government has no business doing business. So you have to formulate the policies and regulations to actually to steer up this transition, because let the market decide whether we have to go with the hybrid, CNG, EV. Let the market compete among themselves. The only thing the government have to do was to formulate the policy, formulate the regulations to make the enforcement of that to happen. So I would like to hear from you, what is our policy roadmap to fuel up this transition from ICE to EV from an MSME lens? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So just to answer Mr. Mohan's question first, if you look at the sales of the previous quarter, the hybrid has overtaken the sales of the EV. So despite the the push from the government which you're talking about, so let the market, like you said, let the market decide what's going to happen, where it's going to go. So having said that, I still acknowledge what you said, and we'll certainly look into how we can do what is required to be done on the hybrid sector. But the signal from the market is that it is in any case going ahead. It is beating the EV hollow now. The trajectory is such. So that's one part. The other thing I wanted let the house know, and you see, change and disruption is going to happen all the time. Don't be afraid of this. It has happened. The history has shown us that it has been happening all the time. And in the last 10 years, the kind of disruption all of us have witnessed in all the aspects of our lives, you look at this, there is the internet, there is telecom revolution, there is a 5G technology, there is, digitalization, there is robotics, there is additive manufacturing, I can go on, there's a huge list. There is disruption happening all the time, all around us. And in these last 10 years, we've also gone through a pandemic, and we've also gone through international crisis. There is quantitative easing going on. There are a host of other things despite the disruptions. And here we are, still, moving ahead. And India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Everybody knows that. So what I'm saying is, let's take this into our stride. Disruption will always happen. Specifically for this sector, maybe it'll be a good idea to go back in time and figure out or study what happened when we moved from steam to diesel and petrol and gasoline. And what were the transition situations over there? What happened to the components? What happened to this labor? All that. Just to take a cue, just to take a learning from there. So this just a small point I wanted to put over there on the table. Now, in terms of finding solutions to this particular disruption, I very strongly feel innovation is going to be the key in this. Now, there are problems in the entire 360-degree situation of this. You've talked about finance, you've talked about labor capacity building. There is problems of technology, there are problems of marketing, and there are problems in terms of product development. So these are the problems of the sector, which is there in every industry for that matter, which is undergoing a disruption or a change. So I want to put on the table the idea of innovation, and innovation is going to drive the solutions, and it already is in some way. So what the government is contemplates is doing for this. So if specifically if you look at in the MSME ministry, and just to also give you one more context, somebody gave me this figure when I came here. So there are 1.88 lakh micro enterprises and 19,000 small enterprises and 4,500 medium enterprises in the present Udyam registration formulation in the auto component industry. And the total investment is 88,000 crores, and the turnover is 7.39 lakh crores. So that's a substantial situation we have over here. And so this entire statistics which I read out is facing this disruption. So the MSME ministry specifically has different schemes on the innovation part, and so it is there are about 50 odd technology centers which are available across the country, which the ministry itself has set up. There are other technologies set up by other departments, Department of Science and Technology, and state governments. There are technology centers set up by the private sector. It is important for us to leverage these institutes. They have been built for this very purpose, to help you ride the transition. Please approach them. We are also telling them to go out and meet the industry. They will help you develop these to make the transition, to find solutions to your products, to provide retrofitment to your machine and equipment, to provide skilling and reskilling and upskilling to the labor force and the working community. Also, there are arrangements with the academia, the IITs, the NITs. So everybody just talks about IITs and Indian Institute of Science. So while that is the top layer, but I want to share with you, the Indian system has in tier 2 or tier 3 towns of India great technology institutes, which are in some cases even better than IT. It's just that it's not the visibility is not there. The kind of talent and stuff which is out there, they are they can do wonders. I'll give you one small example. The MSME ministry ran a hackathon. We ran 3 hackathons for idea generation on different things, and the last one we did was only for women, and this window was open for some 10 days. We were deluged with ideas. We got about 35,000 ideas. Can you believe that? The people of this country are bubbling with ideas. It's just that those ideas are unable to surface and find the and its true trajectory. So what the ministry is doing with those ideas is, we've set up these host institutes, which we call them, and like I said, there are these institutes in tier 3, tier 2 towns, which handhold these ideas and convert them into business. And I don't know about how many are there with the auto parts, but I'm sure there would be. And then these institutes convert them by providing them the prototype development. Then they provide them the testing facilities, they provide them certification facilities. Then they also help them with the capital part, in the investment part. They get them connected with the financiers and the angel investors and so on and so forth. And at the same time, there is also a facility for providing training to the people who will be working on these kind of machinery and equipment which is developed. So my short point is that there is already infrastructure available across the country. Please use it. Please go out there and use them. Check with them, test with them. If you think there is a problem over there, then you tell me, then, or tell us that this is what we need to do, or this is not working in the way it ought to be. But there is a complete infrastructure system available which all of us must use. Thank you.
Thank you, Adishi. Thanks for highlighting the Greek philosophy again. The only constant thing in life is change, and that change need to be get driven by the innovation. So I would like to open the floor for quick questions, because I don't want to keep you away from having the lunch. So please limit to 2 to 3 questions. Over to the floor. Please introduce yourselves before shooting the question.
Yeah. Good afternoon. This is Arvind. I'm from Hosur. I represent the Hosur Industries Association, and I also have a component business. I do fabrication. So the question is, from the SME perspective, especially with the government, the world is changing very fast, and we find that when you come to the tier 2, 3, and 4, and those levels, like some of you mentioned, there is the people are not even aware that the change is happening, and it's sometimes too late when this happens, and there's a lot of turmoil in the industry. So how would the government be able to ensure that this awareness is at least spread around? Like, ease of doing business is something that you talk about. In this area, if something could be done, or if some ideation could come out, that would be great.
So on the ease of doing business, so this is being dealt with in a 360-degree kind of a way. Ease of starting a business, ease of running a business, ease of closing a business. All this is in the works. So I don't have all the details, but I can tell you about the labor code. There were about 239 acts which were applicable to the MSME sector. They have been amalgamated into 4 labor codes, you would be aware, ma'am. And some states have adopted them, some states haven't adopted them. But that is one big effort which the government has done on the labor compliance part. Then there are various acts which were redundant, or duplicate, or running parallelly. So I think about another 200 of those have been done away with. Similarly, I think about 10,000. I don't know the number. Some about some thousand level of procedures have been scaled down. So what I'm basically coming at is that this is an ongoing work, and it'll, as we move along, more and more of this is going to be brought down. So that is as far as the EODB and ease of starting a business is concerned. There is also something which is, I don't know if you've heard of the NSWS, National Single Window System. So all the clearances, be it environmental clearance, be it electricity clearance, or other things, all that is presently available on the NSWS portal. All state governments are on board. Or this government of India, all departments are on board. So, and so that is also still something in the work, but it is already working, and you should certainly look at it. How we can move there. And lastly, on the awareness part, yes. So there are awareness is a problem. So a lot of people are not you know aware of what's happening with the different scheme. What are the different ways we can get avail the benefits from this scheme. So the Prime Minister's Bharat Sankalp Yatra is exactly about that. It is about saturating all the schemes to the last mile. I have myself visited, two remote districts. I've gone to, I don't know if you've heard of a district called Terap in Khonsa. It's the last village in a last district on the Myanmar border. So the government is actually reaching out in the districts, in the villages, in the taluks, and explaining to the people there are so many schemes and you need to saturate them. And the state government, district governments have been given targets to do that. So the Bharat Sankalp Vikas Yatra is actually totally about awareness, and so every ministry and the state government also has various awareness programs. So I see your point, but this is an ongoing work. Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, just very briefly, and you touched upon it towards the end, that when we talk about government, it's not just the national government, but also state and local governments that will play a big role. Similar to what we spoke about, that small industries, big players, everyone's now with this new industry, everyone's learning. I think even in terms of regions that have traditionally been the hubs of manufacturing for auto are now not necessarily going to be the same in the future. So I think there is a lot of responsibility and role that the state level governments can do in doing more regional, not just new schemes, but also planning of how does that current industry transition, how do they also leverage this new opportunity. And again, Tamil Nadu, because we are working very closely with the government, is a great example of how they're looking at not just transition, not just the new industry to become a global manufacturing hub, but also transitioning. And one other thing that I want to mention is, when we say skilling, I think it's a very broad word, and we typically talk about very those NCQF and everything, but it's also about sensitization. So we did a skilling program in Coimbatore over the last year, and this was a skilling program not just for workers, but also for the middle management, for owners, because it's a change of industry, of attitudes. When you talk about skills, the actual job comes last. Actually, there's a lot of change that will need to happen. So I think when we talk about skilling programs, it will have to be at all levels and all actors have to come together. I wouldn't say it's only government. So taking that role ourselves as well to some extent.
You can make it quick. So while you were mentioning about the different schemes and interventions that government has already defined and designed for it, and there was a common theme that came across, that change is the only constant, right? And since we are living in the age of disruption, uh, idea to engineering is a very key element, right? Matlab, in the tech space, we call it MVP, POC, right? Proof of concept, minimum viable product, all of that. But for in case of MSME with relation to manufacturing, so to say, right? If I don't know if it is possible or not, but if there can be the way for tech ecosystem, angels and venture funds are there to help you take an idea to engineering stage to a POC or a MPV stage, right? Can this be a provision created for the manufacturing, right? Something, let's say, I tomorrow go to him and say कि sir मेरे को ये motor का ये component बनाना है, right? But I know that today I don't have that scale because it's a new industry that is evolving. Maybe tomorrow it will be a hybrid or a pure electric or howsoever it is. But something has to enable the early stage of engineering, right? Fund that bridge of reaching out to a minimum viable product in the engineering space. Once a minimum viable product is created, once a stage is set for a larger manufacturing, bank loans come in, right? Larger interventions of subsidies and bank loans come in. But this experimental money, so to say, right? If there can be provisions created for MSME and manufacturing ecosystem, I think that can help uh, work faster with the disruption, right? If things are changing, we can work faster with that.
That's why there are tinkering labs are in
The buzzer keep on buzzing, yes, so I would like to disrupt. So let us conclude our session. Thank you everyone for this insightful discussion over here. And thank you everyone to participate for that. I can hear from the claps that everyone is want to look forward for the lunch.